Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for being here today. My name's DeWayne Burns. I represent House District 58, which is Johnson and Bosque counties, and I'm proud to be the author of House Bill 991. House Bill 991 will provide meaningful eminent domain reform and protect property rights for landowners across Texas. I want to first thank my colleagues that stand with me today in support of meaningful eminent domain reform for all Texans. Thank you for being here with us today. Our goals with House Bill 991 are to improve current eminent domain laws by enacting a more transparent, fair, and predictable system, to provide property owners with more information to give them even footing in the negotiation process, and to implement protections for landowners against entities that act in bad faith and intimidate or take advantage of landowners with lowball offers. Let me be clear, we are pro-growth and want to work to continue the explosive economic progress in our state. Our improvements to the law will not adversely impact Texas' role as an energy leader, nor will they slow the process of building infrastructure needed and necessary to support our growing state and economy. A more equitable process will result in more positive feedback from landowners, meaning a quicker, more congenial process with less litigation, we believe. My office will work with all stakeholders to ensure that improvements are best for the landowner as well as the state of Texas and our economy. We've built a strong coalition, as you can see, of property owners and groups that represent property owners to ensure our reforms to stay on the right track. I'm proud to have many of them here today. Behind me is Bobby McKnight, President of the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, Russell Boening, President of the Texas Farm Bureau, and Bill Canali of the Texas Wildlife Association. Also in the audience and with me, we have representatives of South Texans for Property Rights, the Texas Association of Realtors, and several other landowner groups and property rights advocates. Together, these organizations represent hundreds of thousands of Texas property owners who expect us to do what is right. I know many of my colleagues in both the House and the Senate have had similar conversations with their constituents and the property owner rights organizations. Our joint authors on the bill will represent just that, urban, rural, Republican, Democrat. This is an issue that impacts all Texans. Thank you for being here today. I look forward to passing this bill and helping Texas landowners get a more transparent, fair, and accountable eminent domain process. We're going to try to take some questions at the end of the statements from the press, but right now it is my privilege and honor to introduce the Senate author, Chairman Lois Kolkhorst.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Representative Burns. Thanks to all of you who have gathered today. I want to say to my House colleagues, boy, I love the House. Spent many years there and so proud to be right here behind the House chamber introducing very important legislation for all of Texas. House Bill 991, the counterpart, the companion bill is Senate Bill 421, consists of three components designed to provide additional protections and transparency for landowners who are forced to undergo the condemnation process. I think that this is a very fair way to go about it. I've filed bills for 3 consecutive terms since I entered the Senate, and we've had different iterations of this bill. I think this takes the best of all ideas, meeting with stakeholders over the last 2 or 3 interims, working with those that are standing behind us, coming up with the best idea. And as Representative Burns says, this isn't to slow the progress of our state. This isn't to stop any of that. It's just actually trying to give a level playing field to the landowners. It's a private property rights issue for all of us. So the legislation background has 3 main components. It's 1, define minimum easement terms. The bill requires private condemners to use standardized easement forms that contain minimum protections for landowners related to issues that may not otherwise be known to discuss. Senate Bill 740 from last session contains similar language. This provision includes the maximum number of pipelines, the maximum diameter of each pipeline, the type or category of each substance to be transported through the pipelines, a general description of any use of the surface of the easement the entity intends to acquire, a provision regarding the use and repair of any gates and fences. The second big element is a public meeting requirement. This is something that we see very often used in what we see in power lines, where you have a public meeting and landowners can come out and learn things. And it's a question and answer, and I believe is a process to let people know when they actually are engaged and things move a little bit more peacefully, if you will, after that. So this bill requires a private condemner that wishes to acquire land for the same public use, one or more of tracts located entirely in one county and owned by at least 4 property owners, to hold a public meeting in that county to allow the public to learn about the acquisition. This requirement adds an additional layer of transparency and provides a forum where landowners can have their questions answered. It's just simply put, a way to do a nice Q&A on the front end. And then finally is the low offer protection. Now, for those of us that were around in Senate Bill 18, which was the last eminent domain reform bill that we saw, I think that was in 2011, a bona fide offer was really important. That was one of the heart and souls of that bill. Well, a bona fide offer is just an offer. What we're trying to do is to get a fair offer up front. And so private entities often offer less than the fair market value. This bill will contain a provision designed to prevent those lowball offers. The bill would require a court to award additional damages to a landowner if the special commissioner's award is vastly higher than the initial offer. The bill provides varying levels of damages. If the special commissioner's award to the property owner damages in an amount that exceeds the amount of the condemner's initial offer by, and it stair steps from 25% up to 100% or more, and then gives some damages added to that award, so that you're actually saying to the landowner, we know we've put you through a lot of processes, and this is kind of a bonus at the end of the negotiations. So hopefully that will lead to better upfront bona fide offers that are meaningful and that you've worked through this. Before I turn it over to Bobby McKnight, I will just tell each and every one of you that there is not a week that goes by that my office is not contacted by a landowner with questions about eminent domain. I was stopped at church on Sunday by a lady that I've known most of my life. She's around my age and has land in the Austin County area. And just the things that she was telling me, she said, well, the company wants to come on and survey, and we haven't even begun to negotiate. Just the simple little processes that are, my mother would say, common sense and etiquette of how you treat landowners if you're going to take their land. Now, I'm talking about the bad actors. There are some really good actors, and I've had constituents that I represent that have had very good experiences. So I don't want to, cast a broad net to say that everyone doesn't negotiate fairly, but if we can put into statute certain minimums that give a landowner just a starting point of where to negotiate, I think that it would really help all Texans. I look around, and Representative Burns, what a great group that you have assembled. They're rural, they're urban, they're suburban, they're Democrats, they're Republicans in this room. And I will tell you that I represent kind of what all of Texas is in Senate District 18. I have half of Fort Bend County, a part of Harris County, and I go all the way down to Port Aransas. And I will tell you that recently in the Fort Bend area, where it's very developed, I'm getting tons of phone calls on eminent domain. So everyone listening today, and as we carry this message forward, this isn't just about rural Texas. This is about all Texans, as Representative Burns said. So I'm happy to work on this. I believe the third time is a charm, that we will make great progress. I know the Senate has shown the wherewithal to want to push one out. It's never easy, but we've narrowed this down. We've taken out public entities. We've taken out everything but really these private entities that come onto your land. They can be great partners, but let's just make sure that everything is fair. With that, I'd like to introduce Bobby McKnight. He was mentioned earlier with the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers. And to say that these folks have worked with us a lot in the interim. They're the ones that go out and have the town hall meetings. They're gathering the input. And it's wonderful to see a bill that actually comes from your constituents that bubbles up. It's not a push down, it's a bubble up. And so with that, Mr. McKnight, please join us, and thank you for being here today.
Appreciate it. As Senator Kolkhorst said, I'm Bobby McKnight from Fort Davis, Texas, current president of the Texas Cattle Raisers. TSRA was founded in 1877 to combat rampant cattle theft. Today, we carry on that proud tradition of protecting the stewards of land and livestock in Texas, not only through law enforcement, but also advocating for sound public policy on issues that impact cattle producers and property owners. Nowhere is this advocacy more important than in the realm of private property rights. I would like to thank Senator Kolkhorst, Representative Burns for their commitment to fixing an eminent domain system that is commonly abused and designed to favor private companies who subsidize the profits, their profits with the power of condemnation. Texans deserve better. We deserve an eminent domain process that is open and transparent, that is fair and respectful of our partnership in the energy infrastructure, and that holds private condemnors accountable for bad conduct. Thank you again, Senator Kolkhorst, Representative Burns, and their joint authors. We are proud to support Senate Bill 421, House Bill 991, a tremendous step forward for Texas private property owners. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Russell.
That's fine, that's fine. I can handle that part. I want to remember who I am. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Russell Boening. I serve as president of Texas Farm Bureau. I also am a South Texas farmer, rancher, and dairy producer. Our organization stands strongly behind eminent domain reform. We want to first thank the bill sponsors, Representative Burns and Senator Kolkhorst. We truly appreciate their leadership on this very important issue. It's misleading for anyone to portray these reforms as an attack on progress. We understand the rapid growth of our state will call for sacrifice, careful planning, and yes, eminent domain. However, Texas farmers, ranchers, and rural property holders have a constitutional right to fair treatment and just compensation. It's time for transparency in all property takings, with landowners clearly understanding their rights. There must be true good faith offers and consequences if that does not occur. You may hear of dire warnings that these overdue reforms prevent or delay critical infrastructure. This is not true. It's obvious to us, as it's been said before, that requiring fairness and transparency will lessen the need for legal challenges. When the law allows private entities to take private property, it should also protect the rights of those property owners. Those property owners cannot walk away from the table. They only have two options: accept that offer or get taken to court. Eminent domain reform is the property rights issue of our time. We call on all these champions of property rights, the folks that are up here with us, to step forward and be counted. It's time for Texas to become the property rights state that we'd all like for it to be. Thank you. Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Russell. My name is Bill Connolly. I'm a lawyer and a rancher, and I am the chairman of the Legislative Committee for the Texas Wildlife Association. The Texas Wildlife Association, we call it TWA, is a statewide organization of approximately 7,000 members. It's one of its key elements of its mission is the preservation of property rights for the landowners to take care of the wildlife in this state. In our opinion, there are problems right now with the condemnation process in this state that need to be dealt with. The bills that we're discussing here today are about balancing the out-of-balance condemnation system. It's about providing important information to our landowners before they're required to engage in negotiations with pipeline and highline right-of-way purveyors. It's also about requiring common sense provisions in the long-term relationship between the condemnor and the landowner in every deal. I personally have had to negotiate pipelines on behalf of clients and also on behalf of myself. And I know that if you ask the right questions and you negotiate for the right terms, most of these companies are willing to agree with reasonable, fair provisions to put in the leases. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people, a lot of Texans, that don't know what questions to ask. This bill will provide that these common sense provisions be made a part of any deal, so that all the property owners don't have to go out and hire the most expensive lawyers to negotiate these most important provisions for you. It's also about ensuring that the constitutionally mandated guarantees of fair compensation for what property is taken from you and damages for any damage that may occur to your remaining property are paid. This bill describes what is to be considered in calculating damages for the remainder, and certainly to make certain that if a lowball offer is made, that there are provisions in the bill that requires the condemning authority to pay additional compensation. Recognizing that the current system is out of balance for the improvements that are, and there are needed improvements as set forth in this bill, Senator Kolkhorst and Representative Burns have stepped up to sponsor the bill. We thank them and salute them for their, and we want them to know that TWA is behind them and supporting them in any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. As you can see, we have a wide array of folks that are on board with protecting the property rights of Texans. From North Texas to South Texas, from the Rio Grande Valley to East Texas, even up to the High Plains, we have folks here today that are ready to stand with us shoulder to shoulder and fight for the rights of property owners, and I thank you for that. Thank you for being here. I want to thank my property rights champion in the Senate, Senator Lois Kolkhorst, for all the work she's done in the past and will work this session. We look forward to it. And I want to thank all of the organizations that represent the folks that I represent, the families that we represent, for being here today and showing your support as well. This is meaningful reform. It's common sense. It was born out of our own experiences. It was born out of a will to do what's right by Texans. And I'm eager to work with our partners to figure out what we can do to best serve Texans. And I think it starts right here in this bill. And we will open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
So this does not cover public entities, it's just a private company?
Private entities, yes, sir.
What are some examples of abuse within the cities? Like you mentioned, this covers all of Texas, but are there some examples, say, here in Austin, or inside Houston or Dallas, where this has been a problem?
I think anywhere, the potential and the real practical application of this is that it can happen to any landowner, whether it be a pipeline or electric transmission line or some other, condemnation proceeding that occurs. Can happen to any, whether you're in a city or whether you're in an unincorporated county or in the rural parts of Texas, it doesn't matter. If there's a need for the transfer of energy from one place to another and it goes across your property, it can impact you.
Yeah.
And
I want to speak to that. When I laid out a bill in 2015, I had a gentleman drive down from Dallas, and he wasn't asked to come. He just showed up, and he testified. I think that bill number was 474. And he talked about how a pipeline, he had a piece of property up in the Dallas area, Metroplex area, and a pipeline company wanted to go diagonally across his property. And it would have rendered, he was going to develop it with some lots. He'd, been saving his money to do this. And it would have rendered so many of the lots unusable. And he could not even remotely even like negotiate to say, could you go down the fence line? And so there were people, I'll never forget, he looks at me and goes, I don't know you, but I really like you. And it was great. I mean, because he said it in such heartfelt, I know the State Affairs Committee in the Senate was amazed at how many people just showed up to testify and tell us about their stories. And it wasn't always the rural areas. It was people, all around. We've got a pipeline going through the Katy area right now and receiving lots and lots of phone calls. So it can happen to you. I will say that some of the pushback in working with my colleagues on the Senate side, you look at the cities, Texas Municipal League, Texas Association of Counties, sometimes have fought our bills. They've been pretty good players, but we decided to narrow it for now. But I will tell you that the Texas Department of Transportation, a state agency, testified before State Affairs in 2015 and said if they're taken to court, on average, they award about 28% more than their initial offer. Wow. So would I love for this to include everyone with eminent domain authority? Probably. But in working with all that we've had to work with and go through, we thought that the greatest consensus we could gather was around this imminent crisis of, pipelines and power lines. That's where we hear I hear most often from. The Texas Department of Transportation, they're our friends, but occasionally they make lowball offers too.
Sure.
So I'm hoping this is a step in a process where everybody looks how fair and how well it worked, and then we probably should apply it eventually to everyone involved in eminent domain.
And just to kind of go along with that, many of our public entities that have, that are condemning property do some of these things already and have public meetings. And, so in some ways, we're almost raising the expectation of private entities to match those of some of our governmental entities.
So Senator and Representative Burns, did I understand correctly that there is going to be a standard calculation in the bill to figure things like damages to the remainder of the property? Because that's always been a big sticking point.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, we have a provision in the bill that addresses damages to the remainder. Our intent is that is considered and that our landowners are more informed and know how to deal with that and negotiate that point. And really the whole crux of everything we're doing is really about providing information to landowners. I mean, I know from my own personal experiences, and when you talk to landowners across the state, they have the lack of information is the problem. There's a vacuum of information when you're caught by yourself in a situation where you've been faced with a condemnation proceeding or the threat of eminent domain, don't know who to turn to, don't know what questions to ask, don't know how to value your property, don't know what's next. And that is a scary place to be. And this bill, I think, takes big steps in remedying that problem.
So I know that right now we're talking about for-profit corporations, but for landowners along the Texas border in the south who have also gone through these unfair conditions, for both of you, what is your position on the federal government using eminent domain to take private land from Texans?
Yeah, Representative Burns and I, we just talked about that a few minutes ago. I've been asked that as well. So this bill was narrowly crafted because we've not been able to move a bill through both chambers yet. And like I said earlier in my comments, I'm hoping this is a template that everyone says, this is what we should follow. When we passed Senate Bill 18 in 2011, I hope no one in this room or in the legislature thought that was the end of the debate. It was kind of the beginning of the debate. And I believe that this is the next step. And if one of these bills, the House bill or Senate bill passes, I believe that, again, it's a step forward. And we continue to learn about eminent domain. My goodness, I've been playing on the edges for a while. I created a database. Do you know that literally someone could knock on your door and say they have eminent domain authority, and you had no way to really check that? The comptroller, I passed a bill, it's a database at the comptroller's office, now that we actually have a whole database of people that have eminent domain authority. So with what we're seeing along the border, if the federal government was going to go in and use that, while I have wished that this would be a broader bill, right now it's narrowed very, it's tailored to these for-profit entities. Goodness, if we could get everyone to enough votes, 76, and when I need 19 over there, and then 16. 19, then 16. It's always a little confusing. 19, then 16. you know, we could broaden it, and there may be amendments to that. You never know.
Thank you. Yeah, great answer.
Any other questions? Well, I want to say to my good friend Representative Burns, we had many meetings last session. We learned a lot along the way. There were lots of negotiations, but in the end, we couldn't get both chambers to agree on how we would go about it. Again, this bill is not an up-down approach. This is from the constituents out there that if you know anything about the Farm Bureau, Texas Wildlife Association, or the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers, they have tons of town hall meetings, and they have lots of input from their membership. And this was gathering all of their ideas and then putting it in a form that we feel is very fair. And I want to thank all my House colleagues on the show of support today. We look forward to working with you. Input is the most important thing. And, you know, I was laughing. I said someone stopped me at church. On Friday night, while I was at dinner, somebody else stopped me. And so it's on the forefront of most Texans' minds. If you're impacted by this, if you've had one experience in this realm, it stays with you forever. You told me about your experience, and so we're just trying to give a template to say this is fair. This is fair for the private property owners to give their land up. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. So it should at least be fair and transparent, and I think that's what we have here.
Hear, hear. Couldn't agree more. Thank you all for coming. I want to thank again my colleagues, each and every one of you, for coming today and showing support and standing behind Texas property owners. Can't do it without you, and we look forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you, Senator Kolkhorst, and thank you for being here. Thank you.